everybody. Good morning. Thank you for joining me to have a conversation about this very, very important topic that is very much increasing on the continent and in our workplaces. And it's very important that we start talking about it. So thank you so much for joining me, and I hope that we're going to have a good session on this roundtable webinar series. So if you are joining or using Zoom for the very first time, you realize that you have all these buttons in front of you. So there's a chat box where you can send questions or comments or anything that maybe you want to bring to my attention into the chat box. If you want to say something, you want me to unmute you, if you raise your hands, and you'll find the raising of hands when you go to the buttons, there's like a three dot where it says more, where it has, when you press there, you should be able to see, I think it's the reactions, and be able to put your, select the hand and be able to get my attention that way. In order for this to be interactive, I'm first going to run through the whole issues, and then I'm going to break us up into groups. So I've created these breakout rooms. In fact, randomly, it will just break us into groups for you to go and discuss, and then we come back and then we share from the discussions what everybody else has been saying within their groups. All right, so that we get to have a conversation. And it's not just me talking to you. So when we get to after I've given it, I'll be asking specific questions and then breaking us off into different rooms for you to have conversations about it, and then come back and then we will discuss. I'll probably may try and write down the answers so that everyone can see what we're coming up with concerning this issue. All right, so this one is not the usual webinar where maybe I'm kind of just sharing insights. Okay, great. So let's get going so that we can finish relatively on time. So I'm Anita Wiafe-Asinor, CEO of Omel Africa, and a very great advocate and champion for the HR industry, and particularly in making sure that I'm championing agendas of the HR as it's happening in the international front, and then seeing how obviously we are also able to bring it into our space on the continent. So we can start by everyone introducing yourself in the chat box, maybe your name, your position. If you're coming from another country, do also state and say hi in the comments box. Just a brief background about OML. So OML is an HR, a core HR consultancy, meaning that we're not a recruitment agent, even though we do some elements of recruitment. We purely focus on all things HR. We've been in Ghana since 2010. We've been working in other parts of the continent as well, with a presence also in the UK and Europe. And now we're really trying to push that agenda again now. So if you're having offices there, do come and speak to us. We primarily focus in four core areas of the business. That's the advisory and legal, the HR audit, the outsourcing and the talent, and then our specialist areas is the international HR, and then the family business and SMEs. But you can find out more on our website about our services, so you can always, as you know, connect with me on the social handles. Okay, so now why are we talking about this topic? We're talking about this topic because it's become a very important topic. All of you who I am very sure are on LinkedIn will very much know that on LinkedIn, you keep having all these posts, you're having discussions about diversity, inclusion, and equality. And sometimes when we're seeing these things from the African perspective, we may sometimes feel like this is far away from us, but actually it's not, because many of us are working with international organizations. Many of us are working with local businesses who are very much modernized, who are very much trying to work to international standards. And then also generally, our generations and are coming into our workplaces, the thought processes, the way they think and things are not the same as, what we will call the baby boomers, our parents and those generations before us. So we can't really just decide to take a position of not looking at these important areas as well as practitioners. And it's pretty much come up a lot For me personally, in the work that we do with companies and some of the issues we've actually been facing around these three areas, which kind of made me feel like, you know what, I want to have a conversation to kind of hear from other practitioners what your thought process is on this. So I'll start with just trying to do some simple definitions, and then we'll go into the facts of the matter. So when we are talking about diversity, inclusion, and equality, they all have a different perspective. They are not the same, all right? And really what we're trying to say is that we're trying to ensure fair treatment and opportunity for all. And this very much sounds very easy, but actually in practice, it's not easy, right? And really the aim in trying to do this is to eradicate prejudice and discrimination on the basis of individual or group of individuals protected characteristics. All right, and we'll get into that a bit more. And I wanted to say that specifically, it's about empowering people by respecting and appreciating what makes them different in terms of age, gender, ethnicity, religion, disability, sexual orientation, education, and national origin. Now, the issue is when we get this as practitioners, but to be fair, when we start to talk about this, particularly around the issue of sexual orientation and gender, it's not so easy for us in Africa because here we are where we have over 34 or so African countries where homosexuality is banned, it's illegal, and there's a whole lot of issues. So it's not so easy to address this in the workplace. And this is one element, it's not the main element, it's one element that we have to address because, as I said, the generations are coming in, and eventually we'll have to deal with some of these issues if you're not already. We already have had to deal with a few, but it's going to become an area for HR. So instead of us waiting, we need to be thinking about how we're going to address it. So that's just to lay the foundation on the definitions. I'm sure there are a lot more. Okay, so what are the challenges, right, when it comes to diversity, inclusion, in terms of its management in Africa? Well, I did a lot of research on this, and also because I am championing diversity, inclusion, equality for the ILO. I'm actually a certified trainer in this area. So for me, I'm constantly reading and constantly trying to understand the trends and what is going on. So in kind of trying to do the research for this conversation, I try to do mainly the research around the African context as to the international context. And what I found is what I'm sharing with you now, is that the main challenges around discrimination, the biases, the affirmative action, lack of it, tokenism, glass ceiling effect, which a lot of those in the international space as well would argue it also works there, right? Differences in salary, marginalization of minority groups who are of different background within the workplace, uniqueness is not appreciated, inclusivity is not really realized. People say it, but it's not being really practiced or realized in the work environment. Ethnicity and tribalism is a very big deal for us on this continent concerning these three areas. Beliefs in traditional systems, gender imbalance, and then collectivism, so associations of groups. So these are some of the main challenges. Of course, in the question time, when I break everyone out into groups, you're to discuss to kind of come up with what you also think are the barriers that are affecting us. And one of the other thing is about why this is a problem. So if the previous slide was kind of looking at it as a general context, why is this a problem for us in the workplace? Because we as practitioners are concerned about this in the workplace, right? So it's a problem concerning acceptance and respect. Not every workplace is practicing inclusion, diversity, and equality. It's accommodation of beliefs. I've had instances, I've gone into organizations and sometimes it's territorial. You find, okay, we the Ghanaians are here, we the Kenyans are here, we the Nigerians are here, or it could be it's ethnic or tribal, or we the Hausa speaking are here, we the English speaking, it is here. It happens in our workplaces, you all know it, right? And we need to talk about this because this is not allowing us to benefit from the benefits of managing this well, which we'll look at later on. So that's one of the areas: accommodation of beliefs, ethnic and cultural differences is another one. Gender equality in the workplace is yet to go mainstream. Even though we've improved, there is a lot to do concerning gender equality to truly make it a balanced space in the environment for us. And then there's, of course, physical and mental disability. People who are disabled are still very much excluded in the work environment, despite the fact in most of our labor laws on the continent actually has clauses for people with disabilities and how employers should go about trying to embrace them into the workplaces. We're not doing a great job there, right? Generational gaps, and then, of course, language and communication. So these are some of the things when I started doing the research, I found that are actually affecting us in our workplaces. So as HR practitioners, when we are now trying to look at how do we improve or how do we even introduce diversity, inclusion, and equality into our workplaces, we must begin by looking at how some of these areas may be affecting, right? Maybe may affect us, or maybe in terms of progressing. So, of all of the drivers, ethnicity is a major driver of diversity and inclusion management in Africa. So, that means that's something that obviously sits in culture, and we have to find a way to manage it if we're going to be successful at diversity, inclusion, and equality. All right. So there are different types of diversity, which I'm sure you all know in the workplace. So, you realize we've got of course, race, ethnicity, age, citizenship, education, income, physical disability. We've got skills, beliefs, upbringing, national origin, management status, culture, gender, interest. All these are telling you that you have people in the workplaces having all these different types of factors going on, right? And that's why we champion it. So if you imagine those with different skills, the value they can bring, right? If you look at those who are having, when you're having a diverse workforce with good diverse education, you can see the innovations that can come and so on. So these are the types that are usually operating in our workspaces, and usually we are trying to make sure we increase in if we're actually having a policy. And then there are 4 types of diversity when we're talking about diversity. There's the internal diversity, which relates to a person, what a person is born into. So you don't really have much of a choice there. And examples would be things like your race, your ethnicity. You don't have control over your race, ethnicity, nation, or gender. You don't have any choice on that. That's what you're born into. Then there's the external diversity, which is very much influenced, right, really by the external factors. So things like your personal experiences, your socioeconomic status, your spirituality or religion, all of that, right? It's very important to understand this, because when you start to look at diversity, it's not just from the perspective of you, the HR practitioner. You need to understand that within the workforce, people are coming from these 4 types, right? So it means that whatever initiatives and things you're thinking about, you need to understand that you're dealing with people coming from these 4 types. And therefore, you need to bear that in mind in whatever you're proposing to do. And then we also have the third one, which is organizational diversity, right? So this is what we're talking about, diversity in a diverse work environment, which is positively impacts the whole organization. So here examples are things like job functions, management status, seniority, departments, union affiliation. So here we're saying an organization that embraces diversity in its functions, in its management, in its seniority, in its departments. All right, so that's organizational diversity. And then, of course, we have the worldview, right, diversity. And here we're really talking about how our worldview is different and shapes our past experiences, etc. And examples of worldview will come from cultural events, political beliefs, knowledge of history, and all of that. All right. So that's the 4 areas. And then remember that every one of us are having a perspective from these 4, right? So we need to bear that in mind when we're looking at ways to deal with diversity. Then if we move on, so I want you to be kind of just thinking about this as I'm going through for when we go into breakouts, to think about how are we going to work on this in our workplaces and kind of begin to address the issues. So then there's the 7 pillars of inclusion. So moving from diversity to inclusion. And inclusion, the 7 pillars are: 1, access. Access is both physical and attitudinal. So for example, sometimes people will say, well, you know, when we put the jobs out, we put that, you know, we encourage disabled persons to apply, or we encourage female applicants. But then your workplace is not even disability friendly, right? You didn't also even share it into networks where you're likely to target disabled or people with disabilities who may have the skills you're looking for. You didn't share the job in women's groups or networks, and you're asking more females are encouraged to apply. You're just using your normal channels to attract. So it's about access, right? So if we talk about inclusion, then it means we have to increase the channels of access, right? For the very people that we are trying to bring in to be included, right? But if we're just staying in our narrow way, we're not really, increasing access, and we're not really expanding our inclusion agenda. Then it's also about attitude, right? Which is usually often cited as one of the biggest barriers that underpins all pillars of inclusion, which at the beginning I mentioned that it may be stemming from beliefs, traditions, culture, and all of that has an impact, right, on inclusion. Okay, if you've been brought up to think a certain way about a certain group of people, and now you're in a workplace and you're being asked to work with this group of people who you've been maybe taught to think a certain way, you may find it very, very difficult because your attitude to them has been formed based on whatever you were taught. So for example, over the weekend, I was doing a session with some of the HR students, and we're talking about the whole gender thing, which we'll come on to. And one of the students was like, madam, I'm a Christian, right? And so we were talking about the whole gender issue, and he was like, well, I'm a Christian, and his faith is that obviously being a Christian, he's not in favor of sexual orientation and all this gender stuff, and he began to go into it, right? And that has to be received to a certain extent because that's the attitude, that's what he believes, that's where he's at, right? So just trying to give an example of sometimes we all have our attitudes that have been built. Sometimes that may affect when we're talking about inclusion and diversity, may have an impact on it, right? And I'll come back to what the responses are when we get to the questions there. Then the choice in terms of inclusion about providing a range of options. Okay, so if we are not we are not providing a range of options to people, we're not really being inclusive, right? So job opportunities and things come up, we don't open up the options for other people to be able to apply. We're not really practicing that pillar of inclusion. Then partnership for inclusion to work, you need to have effective, mutually beneficial partnerships, right? Partnerships are very key in terms when it comes to inclusion. Communication is another one that is very important. It's critical to the success of conclusion, because usually when people don't communicate well, things start to fall apart, right? When people don't communicate well, it can actually even turn into a conflict, all right? So communication is very, very important, and it means that you may have to change the habits and adapt new methods of how you speak and the kind of ways that you communicate, right? So if you're talking about inclusion now, maybe there are people in the environment you want to include, but there are some unconscious bias, and the way that we speak about such people is not probably the best. So we have to look at our speech, the way we communicate when it comes to inclusion. And then of course, policy for inclusion to become part of core business, right? We can talk about diversity, inclusion, and equality, but if we don't really have a policy that is well implemented to back it and push it, all we're doing is just kind of doing talk shop, right? So in the 7 pillars, policy is important. And then lastly is opportunity, making practical changes to what we do so that all people get a fair chance, right, at opportunity. And you hear that under the equality side, we say equality of opportunity. So these are the 7 pillars of inclusion that if you're really trying to practice and bring inclusion into your workspaces, you need to consider how are we going to do this, or how are we doing this currently in our workplace to ensure that our inclusion strategies are actually effective, right? Then we move on to look at gender equality and equity. And I want to make a point that, because generally speaking, women are the ones that are probably at disadvantage when we come to talking about gender equality. For us, when we're talking about gender equality in the workplace as practitioners, we mean both male and female in this instance, in the sense that if in your workplaces, that actually, what, a lot of the things we do are very favorable to the women, but actually we need to do more to make it better for the men. You need to look at those aspects of change. All right. So we're trying to say that it's normally when you say, we automatically jump to the perspective of women, but actually as practitioners, as HR, we are trying to look at gender as a whole, right? So just to make that point. So gender equality really means an individual's rights, responsibility, and opportunity will not be determined by the sex they are assigned at birth, right? So while gender equity is the equal treatment or treatment that might be considered equivalent in terms of rights, benefits, obligations, and opportunity, all right? So that's the equity. Now, in Africa, 70% of women are excluded financially, right? We made gains, but we still remain, it still remains this way. So that means financial exclusion is not just about not being able to have access to loans. It's even in terms of workplaces, in terms of pay, and a whole lot of stuff, right? The continent has a US 42 billion financial gap between men and women. According to McKinsey Power Parity Report, Advancing Women Equity in Africa, Africa's gender parity stands at 58%. So that one will be full parity, which is quite a big gap that we need to work on, right? And the best people to kind of champion, especially in the workplace, in terms of equity and parity, is the HR, us as HR practitioners, right? The African continent has demonstrated commitment to promoting gender equality and empowerment of women, right? We have really come a long way. I mean, we will still argue we have a long way to go, but I always think whether it's a small step or a big step, we should celebrate because we've made a step, right? We're not where we were starting from. So we've come a long way, right? Almost all countries have ratified the Convention for the Elimination of All Form of Discrimination Against Women, almost, right? More than half have ratified the African Union Protocol on the Rights of Women in Africa. So that's good as a general rule for us as in our nations, right? But we need to do more when it comes to gender equality in the workplace, right? For women, right? And so here we look at the 4 pillars of gender equality. So here we're saying promoting women's security and combating gender-based violence in the workplace. This whole year we've been championing diversity, inclusion, and gender, and we've been talking about when it was the Violence Day. I've forgotten the national day. And, we were talking about violence against women in the workplace in the form of sexual harassment, sexual abuse, and actual rape and physical violence in the workplace. And we're talking about the role of HR. It's not just about a policy. Sometimes it just feels like, oh, we have a policy, but the policies are not being implemented. The policies are not being, people are not being made aware, people are not being empowered, right? For whatever reason, to actually feel safe and feel secure that actually, I've just gone through this, I'm being sexually harassed, or I'm going through this violence that is happening over and over again. I don't feel I can actually speak up. I can't give up my job, and a whole lot of stuff. You all know it, right? And this is very important. If we're talking about equality, we need to really make sure that it's not just written in a document, but we've actually incorporated these things into our practices, that people actually utilize them. If you have policies, especially ones around grievance and these issues we're talking about, and nobody's coming to you, nobody's raising an issue, you should ask yourself, is this policy working? Sometimes we take that to mean, everything is okay. And I can tell you with authority that everything is not okay. It usually means people are just not utilize it because they don't feel they can. But if you really want to know, you have to go and ask, right? You have to do that survey to ask people, do they feel confident to talk about harassment and violence, etc., in a workplace that they may be encountering. I will tell you whether your policy is working. Women's political participation and influence is very important. The same way it's very important in a workplace to have, we're not saying just go around appointing people. We're saying give them the opportunity to also apply for positions of leadership, of management, that become available, allow them to also get into these positions to use their influence to do positive things. Women's economic empowerment and working conditions is a very important one. One of the ways that I see in the future of work is that women are going to be the ones deciding where they're going to work. And where they're going to work is very much going to be dependent on the working conditions. How are your family-friendly policies? You understand? How are your policies on diversity, inclusion, and so on? And it's not going to be this case where now it's like, even to have children is some kind of crime. People are having to lose their careers. People are having willy-willy termination clauses. Willy-willy, all of a sudden the person is pregnant, now there's performance issues, next minute she's being sacked. And I have to say, sadly, it's our own women in HR who are also participating in these types of actions. And if we are supposed to be the ones championing gender equality and we are the very people supporting employers to do the wrong thing concerning women, I'm not sure how far we're going to go. So this one I've highlighted because this one really sits with us in terms of the working conditions and empowerment, right, in the workplace. And then national accountability on gender equality and women's empowerment. All right. So if you're looking at the 4 pillars of gender equality, I'm saying number 3 is a very big deal. All 4 can equate to the workplace, but really working conditions and how we're empowering women in the workplace is very important. And as I said, if you know that actually we're doing this very well, but actually we can do more of empowerment on our men, then that's where your focus should also be. All right. Okay, so having kind of laid very briefly, I know I'm not really trying to delve into it in deep because really want to have a conversation. I'm just trying to lay the foundation for that conversation. So why does this matter, right? It matters because contrary to what some people may think, because whenever you talk about this, people look at it either are going to look at it in a positive way or in a negative way. But the fact of the matter is, it does matter. It does have an impact on a lot of things in the workplace. Number one is employee performance, right? Research has shown that employee engagement was higher at organizations embracing diversity and inclusion. And we're saying that when employees feel included, they are more engaged, produce greater quality work, and stay longer within the organization. Now, I always say, when these things are said, you're thinking, okay, but my encouragement to you is do your employee engagement surveys and ask the question, right? And then you will know, is what we're saying the truth or not, right? Ask your employees, right? Do you think our organization is diverse and inclusive and practices equality? Would you enjoy working here more if we did this more? Ask them the questions. You will have your data and you will know whether it's better, whether it improves employee performance or not. All right. You can always test some of these things that we share with you by actually practicing it in your organization. And I actually want to encourage you to do that. There's nothing better than having your own internal analytics in order to bring change, right? Then more innovation. So hiring people from diverse backgrounds, bring a variety of new perspectives to the table, different personal experiences, benefit decision-making and problem solving, right? Leading to more creative, productive teams. I'll give you a very quick example of a client where they were moving out into the regions with a particular product. And what happened in short is that the employees who were coming from those regions, when we were trying to figure out how to insert that, how to go through channel into that particular region, were the ones who were able to give insights about the culture, the approach, etc., to the company in order for them to be able to channel that product to those regions, right? The employees who came from those regions. So don't underestimate the power of diverse background within your organization when it comes to innovation and input. Then higher revenue. So one of the top long-term values is that diverse workforce perform better financially, right? Show different perspective. When people feel appreciated and valued, generally it gives them a higher raise in terms of motivation, right? And a number of studies have shown that companies with diverse leadership teams have 19% higher revenue, right? Again, these are some of the, I'm always saying, the value adding KPIs, the value adding measures that HR can test out, right? That HR can test out to really bring some value conversation onto the table, right? So 90% higher revenue and capturing larger market shares. Company diversity also matters in terms of a positive brand reputation that matches customers' values. How are you testing this within your organization? But we're saying when you are managing diversity, inclusion, and equality, these are some of the benefits. And then larger talent pool. So cast a wider net for talent, like I was making the example earlier about access and the inclusion. So find the best candidates for your job openings by reducing unconscious bias in the recruitment processes, right? So that's all the wording we're using, etc., right? Can very much put off talent in applying. Recruiters can create a blind system of reviewing resumes, right? So if I was telling my staff the other day that if we're really practicing equal opportunity from an issue that came up, then we don't need to be putting people's names, right, on CVs who are shortlisted. It's irrelevant, right? We're looking at skills, experience, etc. We should just be putting numbers, right, on CVs, sending it to managers, shortlist without names, right? That's where the unconscious bias comes in the sense that someone can see someone's name. People are very good at doing that. Look at someone's name and know which tribe or where they come from. You know, I'm not very good at that. But I know people who are this, oh yeah, this person's what I'm thinking, how do you know that from the name? But then people know, right? Because they've been in an environment a very long time. They want to remove that. We should just have a number, move the name, move all the information of identifying whether they're gender, etc., out and just give it a number. Review the resume per the factual information in it, right? And make your decision. So these are some of the things if we want to make sure that we are reaching a wider talent pool and people are not discriminating on using unbiased conscious discrimination, right? So this is why it matters for better employee performance, more innovation, higher revenue, and a larger talent pool. Okay, so I've been talking, laying the foundation, right, for us to be able to go into our various groups and have our conversation. But we can't go yet without first also looking at the law side. So if you can say that the first part of what I've been talking about was really trying to talk about it from the organizational practice perspective, looking at the issues, looking at the pillars and how we need to be thinking. We can't do so without also looking at the law, right? Because there is a law element, because there are elements of this discussion that obviously is controversial or it sits in law. Okay, so what does the law say about our diversity, our inclusion, and our equality, right? We must also understand that, because as you know, as practitioners, we are always looking at things in two ways: compliance and practice, right? So if we start with what the law says, in over 34, I think about 37 or something, of African countries, of which obviously you can see Ghana, Nigeria, etc., where homosexuality is criminalized, right? It's criminalized. And I think, I'm mentioning that for a reason, and we'll come to that. So we have a scenario where that element of that can sit under sexual orientation and, of course, the whole gender debates that are going on around the world. And we can't ignore it. We have to begin to look at it and handle it within the confinements of the law and, of course, in practice. Okay, for all these countries, when we're talking about sexual orientation, when we're supposed to not be discriminating, where sexual orientation is part, we have this our issue through no fault of our own as practitioners in the countries that we're in, where this is criminalized, right? So now let's have a look at it in a bit of a breaking down. I'm using Ghana as an example, but I know that in looking at some of the other labor laws and constitution is pretty much the same, right? Because they all joined the ILO convention, etc. So more or less everyone is following suit. So in terms of, for example, in Ghana, in terms of we talk about diversity, in Article 17 of our 1992 Constitution, It provides that all persons shall be equal before the law, and that further persons shall not be discriminated against, right, on the grounds of gender, ethnic origin, social and economic status, right? The point I want to make here for you for your discussions is that you can see it said gender. It hasn't actually defined what gender is, all right? Then when we go on to inclusion, there are also regulations on fair treatment in our Labour Act 203. There's also sections on non-discrimination. So employers are prohibited from discriminating against persons or employees with disabilities, of women, of gender, as I've said. That the Constitution has also translates into the Labour Act. And it's the same when you go into the other Labour Acts around the continent. Then we come on to equality, right? And in equality, on all the labour laws, it has around equal pay, equal treatment as well, right? And then in our constitution, it also talks about equal choice of profession. So people have a choice on the professions. Women have choice, men have choice in terms of the profession that they want to choose to go into. And then as here too, as with some other African countries, there is a whole national gender policy, right? So outside of having the practice side that we know is good for the business, there is also a whole law and statutes and regulatory side to this whole conversation that as a practitioner, you should be aware, all right, in terms of when you are deciding that, okay, right, I'm going to work on this, you should be aware of that. So I've just tried to highlight a few here. And of course, you can do further research on that. So this now brings me into some of the questions that I want us to discuss, because a lot of you listening know about diversity, inclusion, and equality. And the issues for me is two things. Is one, how do we champion it and make it a reality? And then the second issue is that how do we deal with some of the new things, the new channels that are coming into the conversation. So this whole issue around LGBT, looking at that from our practice to our law to what we know about diversity, inclusion, and equity, right? We have to look at it because, as I said, there are a lot of different personalities coming into our work environment. And if you're working with international organizations, embassies, etc., you can't really get away from some of these more challenging areas that we need to look at. All right. So I'm going to stop sharing for 1 minute and come back to the screen. What I'm going to do is I'm going to break us up, right, into groups. Okay. I'm going to break us up into groups. And when you get into your group, I'm going to, we're going to discuss the first question. Sorry, actually, I was supposed to be sharing, not taking the screen down. So we're going to discuss the first question, which is, what is HR's greatest challenge, right, when it comes to diversity, inclusion, and equality in the workplace, right, from the African perspective? What is our greatest challenge, right, when it comes to diversity, inclusion, and equality in the workplace? And in discussing this, I want you to look at it from even yourself, right? What is your position when it comes to diversity, inclusion, and equality? What is your organization? What is your management? What is the employee? What is the challenge, right? What are the challenges, shall I say, is what I want you to discuss in the first question, all right? What are the greatest challenges, HR's greatest challenges in looking at these three areas, all right? So I want people to not necessarily be with maybe their friends or whatnot. So I am going to do a random breakout, okay, where it's going to automatically assign us into groups, okay? So in a minute, what will happen is when I say create, it's going to break you into a group, and you see that it will flash on your screen to join the group. So you just need to click the join on the screen if this is your first time doing breakouts, and it will take you to the room that you've been assigned. All right. Okay. So give me 2 seconds whilst I create a group. So just so you know, in group 1, I have which I don't have all the name. I think I've got Alethea, Mohammed, Nadu, Emmanuel, and Ishmael in group one. In group two, in room two, I've got Abigail, Angela, Disfa, Nana, Boating, and Valentina in group two. In group three, I've got Kioma, Ebenezer, Eunice, Genevieve, and Ioma. And in room four, I have Amma, Dorcas, Edward, Tolufari, Juliana. In room five, I have Dinah, Gabrielle, Helena, Samuel, Vieira in room five. All right. So I'm about to open all the rooms, and the first questions you are discussing. So maybe you pick a team leader in each group, right? Who will maybe feedback when we come back. I'm going to give everybody like 5 minutes to have maybe 10 minutes to have this discussion on what is HR's challenges when it comes to diversity, inclusion, and equality in the workplace. All right, so I'm opening the rooms for you to join your groups and have a discussion. So I think most of you are all coming. I've come back to the main room. So I'm just basically going to start with room one, right? And ask in room one, what did you come up as HR's greatest challenge? Maybe you want to give us 3 key things that you came up with. Room one, which was, I think was, it had Mohammed, Edith, Emmanuel, Ishmael, Alethea in there. What did you come up with?
Hi, Anita.
Yes.
This is Emmanuel here.
Emmanuel, yes.
Unfortunately, we couldn't discuss much because I believe most of our group members were engaged. So, but at the very last end, we had one that has to do with discrimination based on gender. For example, when there's an opportunity for a senior role, it has to do, and it's advertised. Men are mostly seen as the preferred candidates instead of women who may be equally competent. And I just also want to add that in the industry in which I work, which is a male-dominated industry, it is difficult to get women coming up because most of the jobs or most of the tasks or engineering roles, you hardly find women going to that space. So it becomes difficult to, even when you really want to get them in there, it becomes really difficult. So we for example, made put in place intentional measures to give women or female who have the minimum requirement some leverage, not to say that we overlook other males, but to give them some leverage to encourage them to actually apply and be considered. Because I believe earlier you spoke about giving access and choice. So we have put in place deliberate measures to ensure that when it comes to roles that has to do with engineering, for example, we give them some leverage to encourage them, and where we find them to be competent, yes, why not? We give them the chance.
Thank you. Fantastic. Thank you. That was very good. Group two, Abigail, Angela, Anaya. What did you come up with in your...
Well, not that I have everything she wanted to say. We were just discussing round, and there wasn't enough time for everyone to speak. But the case in point is the diversity issue and the issue of nepotism, choosing people because they are from your area and not because of what they can do. So we talked about HR driving the process by ensuring that people are recruited based on their capacity and capabilities to do the work, not because they are from your area. And also on the LGBT, we do know that back here in Africa, especially in Nigeria, there is a 14-year law that if you're found in this act, this is the punishment. So we align with what the federal government has in place for that. So you can't go outside of the general law governing LGBT. So it's not a case of discussion right now in my space. I have not had cause to discuss about that in my space, but we just align with that policy. And then the swift action that we
Wondering if something has been said at all about our group, what we discussed. Only one person had the chance to talk. But basically, I was just going to add to whatever the person said. I don't know if it's been shared already. Was the communication of these policies that we talked about, the need to put policies in place. So the one who talked about the fact that they had policies in place, and then more importantly, the policies were designed based on the law as we have it also in Ghana. So, which is a good thing. But I was going to add that hiding the policies, just at the management level or keeping it at management level would do us no good. It is important that as we design these policies or even propose at the proposal stage, we do a lot of communication to our employees so that once we start implementing these policies, it's easier for everybody to align to it. That's what I wanted to add. And then we were brought back into our main group. So,
okay. Fantastic. Very good. That's also very useful information there. So I hope everyone, I'm trying to type them up so that when we finish, we can also share the conversation. Okay, so then we move on to group 3. That's Chioma, Ebenezer, Eunice, and Genevieve. And what did you come up with?
Hi, Anita. Good afternoon. Very interesting theme. So we were 5 in my group, and we had a lot to talk about. Some of the challenges were like almost 7, but I'm just going to talk about 3. Okay. So one was work environment and how there was an example that was given about if your work environment is not disabled friendly, wanted to see and another thing to match it with action, which is having a disabled friendly workspace for employees. Then we also talked about management buying. We can talk up a storm about how we want these initiatives to be driven across board, but without management buying, sometimes it can be stuck in one place, and that's our heads, and not move, and then we'll get frustrated and wonder why it looks like nothing is being done. And then training, because part of some of these initiatives are change management initiatives in a way. It's one thing to say we're introducing a policy, whether it is governed by a legislation or not. It's another thing to have people trained and having that adequate knowledge to know, okay, this is how. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can. Please, if you're not talking, please mute your sound just so that we can hear her. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, so you're saying about the training is key.
Yeah, training is key, so that way everyone knows what they need to do, from management down to the last person who opens the door for us to work in. And then there is a need to, in time with training, have communication channels open between management and stakeholders who don't necessarily have to be employees, but also vendors that we work with. And then we talked about education, because you who is a HR practitioner who is driving this initiative needs to be educated or have some form of training about these initiatives before you bring them to the workplace. The last one was cost implications, depending on the initiative in question. Cost implications could be shut down by management to say, oh, while we appreciate what you're trying to bring on board, at this time, I don't think budgetary allocations will allow for that initiative to. But those are just 5 things that we spoke about. And then we were trying to see how we could profile solutions to these challenges before we were taken out of the breakout room. Well, it was a very engaging room, to say the least.
Okay, in your next one, I'll allow you a little bit longer, okay?
Of course.
All right, so we move on to room 4. Room 4, what did you have? I think that was Amma, Dorcas, Juliana. Did you have any points that you want to share with us from your discussion? Are we there?
Hello.
Yeah. What were your 3 points or key areas?
Okay. We kind of found out that I think we have the same issue that Group 1 has, because we've both found out that it's more like a male-dominated kind of environment. So there's this issue when it comes to the doing interviews for some roles, the gender inclusion part of it, yes. And then the second part, we found out that also has to do with, I don't know how to call it, but whether it's discrimination when it comes to, you have the expats and you have the locals, the disparity between the two of them being so much that it's, when they try to discuss something, it's not easy because the experts don't want to listen, though the locals want to discuss, but the experts don't want to listen because they feel that they have more, should I say, advantage, or yeah, let's just put it at advantage or something like that. And then when it came to the gender part of it, the reason for not having maybe more females on those roles are because, as my colleague Juliana put it, it becomes a problem when there are some places that you need the female to go and she can't go there. She can't climb to such some heights. Maybe if there's a shift system, in case she falls pregnant, she can't do the shift. So you need more. There are actually HRs, we have to think about that one as well, because during that time when she is pregnant, when she has her family as well, there are things that she cannot do. So the supervisors are actually thinking about, okay, let's get more males, because whatever it is, they won't get pregnant. They won't do this. They won't do that. They can do this. They can do that. So it's like the odds being against the other gender. That is mainly what we were talking about. Yes, before we were dragged in. Yes.
Okay. Right. Thank you for that. Now, group 5. Group 5, okay. That was Dinah, Gabrielle, Samuel, and Vera. Let me just duplicate. What did you have? Did you have anything you want to add to what we're discussing?
Right. Okay. So this is Vera presenting for Group 5. Okay. Basically, we looked at it from the cultural perspective. We said that there's a very strong cultural bias or barrier that does not allow for such diversity to be in place in the workplace. Then we believe that it comes from all angles. It comes from the bigger cultural perspective, organizational culture, religious biases that does not allow. And then we also looked at the fact that it influences the kind of policies that are even passed. And we also looked at the fact that we needed to champion it a bit more as HRs, make sure the education is going on and people begin to understand and buy into it. But of course, like other colleagues have said, we also need management buy-in. If that is lacking, it becomes a challenge to push whatever it is that you have. We tried to look at the other aspect, how we could jump the hurdle and look at the laws when we were called out. So that is what we have. Yes, we have.
Okay, fantastic, guys. You've done great, right? You've done absolutely great on that question. So we can see that there's a lot of factors affecting us, or maybe as an impediment in us improving here. But I think we can also say that we can do something about quite a number of them, right? To begin to champion some of the initiatives, the positive initiatives of diversity, inclusion, and equality in the workplace. And a lot of the things you've raised are exactly the very thing that are the barriers in the workplace that we've got to tackle as practitioners. So that's fantastic. And I will, as I said, I will make sure we create this and share. Now, the second part of this, which I'm going to break it out again, but just want to introduce it, is really around this whole, and I think it was Abigail from one of the groups, I think, has already made reference to Nigeria having laws and then working within the general law. But we do have to look at it because, of course, we are all not working in the same organization. We are working in different organizations. We're working with outside of the country. We're having to be all over. So some people, this may not necessarily affect. Some people, it does. So this is really around this whole understanding the gender discrimination in the workplace. So we've talked about the traditional definitions of gender, which we all know to be male or female, right? However, we now have the situation where we have people coming in and having different identities to gender. We have a whole the whole issue being raised about equality now, and making sure we deliberately expand to make sure that we are being inclusive when it comes to LGBT. Please just help me by you know, where we're talking about diversity, inclusion, equality, we're being told that we now need to also, just as we're talking about making it an organizational-wide activity, we need to take into consideration LGBTs, etc. Now, the challenge, as I said at the beginning, is that here we are where some of us are operating in countries where there are laws, right? Where there are laws that are against some of these practices, and that's not really fault of our own. However, even though we know there are laws everywhere, it doesn't stop employees or you having to deal with this issue, right? So for example, if you're working in an embassy where the country that the embassy you're working with, that particular country has laws that champion LGBT and champions a whole lot of other things, you've got to conform. Like, you've got to make sure that whether it's Ghana or not, if you're on embassies on your own country soil, as they say, so you've got to have ways of handling that. We also have scenarios where now maybe someone may say, I don't want to disclose my gender. They've not told you that they are an LGBT, but they've said, I don't wish to disclose whether I'm a male or female, or they want to have, I do not wish to specify. And I can tell you that in Africa here, Ghana here, we are having to deal with such issues, right? So it's here and we need to talk about it. So in this next group, I want us to begin to brainstorm, because at the end of the day, just because something may not be necessarily facing, doesn't mean it's not happening. And then I also feel in discussing this, it's important for us to really also look at it from the perspective of what we think, because sometimes our own personal biases comes into play. And we have to ask ourselves, should it come into play as HR, where we're supposed to be balanced, where we're supposed to be making sure that the decisions and things we make or we initiate or champion are for the greater good of the people and the organization? Should your views and opinion influence you from maybe offering equality or inclusion to all? Like, these are the things we have to talk about. They're hard questions, they're hard, difficult conversations, but we've got to begin to start talking about it to see how we are going to address it uniquely to us in our environment, taking into account our laws, our cultures, our traditions, our beliefs, and the fact that, you know, you are likely at some point to have to deal with this, law or not. People live, right? People express themselves, and whether there's a law or not, it may happen. And even if you're going to go down the law line, how are you going to go down the law line? How are you going to communicate that? It's all very important. So in this one, we're asking, what is your understanding on the law on gender discrimination concern in the workplace? Do you think it includes LGBTs? How will you deal with LGBT employees in your workplace? Or if someone does not wish to disclose their gender, or comes back to you now and says, I no longer wish to have myself on the file as female, I want to put do not wish to disclose or other or something like that. How would you deal with it? Let's have a conversation. So I'm going to recreate the room so we're not going to be in the same rooms with the same people from the last time. It should be recreating, right? And then I'm going to put for you to join the room. So I'm asking the question for you to discuss. What does all these new discussions around gender in the workplace, identifying differently from our traditional norms of male and female, about the discussions about being more inclusive of LGBTs in our workplaces, where we are peculiarly affected by laws that are against, like what can HR do? What are you going to do now if someone came to you now, it's instance, I'm not making disclosures to you. However, I don't wish for you to consider me this and that. How are we understanding this, and what are we are going to approach in light of what we know? So I'm opening the rooms to allow you to have this conversation. So I'll give you about 10 minutes. So once the room opens, how did that go? I'm interested to find out what we are going to be suggesting here. Very good. So we'll start again with, let me just break this into two. We'll start again with room 1, which had Alicia, Chioma, Helena, and and Vanessa. So what did we come up with concerning this issue of understanding gender discrimination in the workplace? Do we include LGBTs? How do we deal with LGBT employees in the workplace? How do we deal with all of this with the law, culture? What did you come up with? Room 1, starting room 1. Speaking here. Room 1. Chioma, Helena, Vanessa, and Alicia, I think. Anyone from those groups back in the main room? Everyone should be back now. Who's speaking for room 1? Okay, so I'm going to move to room 2 until room 1 is ready, then I'll come back. So room 2 was Amma, Angela, Dinah, Samuel, and Vera. What did you come up with? What was the highlights that you concluded on? Room 2.
Okay, hi, Anita. Dinah here from room 2. Okay, so on the question, this is our discussion and our understanding of the law on the gender discrimination concerning the workplace. So we were of the view that per the Constitution and our labor law, it does not give room for discrimination. Even though it was not explicit on what LGBT is in the law, it does not give room for discrimination. So the understanding is that there's no discrimination as far as our laws are concerned. Now, do you think it includes LGBT? So like I said, it was not explicit. And if you look at our cultural practice, for instance, Ghana here, it is not allowed. Ghana is now working at coming up with a policy or a law concerning the LGBT. So as we speak, or as it says now, there's no policy or law around that. Now, how will you, in terms of how to deal with LGBT employee in our workplace, what we discussed or we came up with is that, one, the law encourages us not to discriminate. So if we find them in our workplace, at the end of the day, we are looking at productivity. We are looking at their output and their deliverables. So we should accept them in our workplace and work with them as such, because our law doesn't encourage us to discriminate against them. Yes, so basically this is what we discussed. If my colleagues, if I have, just in case I've left something that my colleagues will want to add.
Yeah, okay. Did you want to add anything else?
Dana, thank you so very much. This is Angela.
You're welcome there. You're welcome, colleagues.
Go on, Angela.
Yes, thanks so much, Dinah, for the input. Yes, that was what we discussed. And we did say that at the end of the day, we are all human beings and we should love them for what they are. The key point is, are they able to deliver on their KPIs? If their orientation is not affecting their deliverables in any way, we shouldn't be the ones raising it. Yes, the law of the land is there. We must make that clear. If it is the policy, it is the policy. However, because the labor law says no discrimination of anyone, we would not also be discriminating the person because he or she is under this category of employees or of human beings. We should love them, treat them well, and perhaps through that they may have a change of mind and try to live normal. Because for us, we're thinking that this is beyond any of us here, because it's unthinkable as Africans, as Nigerians. It's not normal.
Yeah. Yeah, in our environment, that is it. That is what is out there. But I think what we're saying that in our workplaces, we need to follow what we know the law says, which is not to discriminate. And actually, is a very good point. Good point to be made here on focusing on productivity, results, and not necessarily on people's personal choices. So, talking about gender equality and equity. And I was saying that basically when we talk about gender equality, we are really talking about individual rights, responsibilities, and opportunities. And we're saying basically equality to sexes or to the assigned birth. So when we talk about equity, here we're saying about the equal treatment or the treatment, we consider to be equivalent in terms of rights, benefits, obligations, and opportunities. So gender equality is about not determining, it's about individual rights, responsibilities, and opportunities not being determined by their sex. And equity is about the treatment, i.e., having equal access to benefits, obligations, and opportunities. And in Africa, 70% of women are excluded financially. And also in terms of the continent, we have like 42 billion financing gap between men and women, even when we come into business and so on and so forth. And according to McKinsey's Power of Parity report, advancing women's equity in Africa, that's Africa's gender parity, stands at 0.58, meaning we're not even at one full parity in terms of equity, which is not great. And then the African continent has also, regardless of all of this, we're demonstrating a commitment to promoting gender equality and empowerment of women. I think a lot of the issues is that some of these things we're talking about now, not just promoting, but actually trying to implement activities, systems, and processes that actually does champion gender equality in the environment. And we're not just now just looking at gender from the perspective of women, we also look at gender from the perspective of men in the workplace, because of course it's about equality of opportunity in the environment as well. Okay. So there are 4 pillars of gender equality. We have promoting women's security and combating gender-biased violence. We have women political participation and influence, and then we have women's economic empowerment and working conditions, which is what this third pillar is the one we're kind of talking about in the workplace, the working conditions for women in the workplace. And then the 4th one is national accountability on gender equality and women empowerment. So the third pillar is what employers should be looking at. So then why is diversity, inclusion, and equality matters? Why does it matter? Why should we even consider it? Why don't we just carry on how we are? And time after time, both research in sub-Saharan Africa and research outside show that we get better employee performance, right? Better employee engagement. They found we're higher in organizations who are embracing diversity and inclusion. And basically the premise is that where employees feel included, they are more engaged, they produce greater quality of work, and they stay longer with that company. Nobody wants to stay somewhere where they don't feel appreciated, they don't feel included, they don't feel that their background or who they are is appreciated, they don't feel they have equal opportunity, they will leave, right? So and this is from whether they're in the top leadership down to the very last employee. And then they also found more innovation, that hiring people from diverse backgrounds brings a variety of new perspectives to the table. So different personal experiences benefit decision-making and problem-solving, leading to more creative and productive teams. So this is also important at the C-suite level. If we just have people who all think the same and who all are acting the same, then it means we have problems in the organization. We don't have any diversity of minds. We are all thinking the same. So if we all think we can't solve the problem, then the problem is just there, right? But when we have a diverse, somebody else will bring a different experience, a different suggestion, a different innovation, which can actually help us solve our problems or do the things that we want to do. Higher revenue, right? So one of the top long-term values is that diverse workforce perform better financially, right? So a number of studies have shown that companies with diverse leadership teams have a 19% higher revenue and capture larger market shares, right, than those who don't. So company diversity also matters in terms of positive brand reputation that matches customer value. So this is where the HR will also need to look at the employer brand when we're talking about this in terms of attracting talent, right? So it really has an impact on higher revenue. And of course, if nothing else, just these 4 even here should be enough to motivate us to kind of look at this closely. And then cast a wider net for talent. So larger talent pool when we're operating in a diverse, when we're trying to make sure that we get the best talent from different backgrounds, different experiences, and we're making them inclusive within the organization at all levels. And then we're also allowing access in terms of equality to opportunities. We means we're widening our talent pool. So we'll not just say, okay, we only want this type of people, so we're only going to advertise this job here, or we're only going to hire people who are made referral by this type of people, or this group of people, or these persons with this background. We're not doing that in looking at diverse, inclusive, and equity environment. We're looking at larger talent pools. So we cast a wider net for talent. So we find the best candidates for the jobs openings by reducing unconscious bias. So like when you do the diversity, inclusion, and gender training, we look at this particular thing, how we reduce unconscious bias in the way we recruit in our recruitment process, right? And that's very important, because that alone, if you don't get it right, you wouldn't even get the people applying in the first place, because you've got unconscious bias in the way you're advertising or the way you're placing the job advert. So sometimes people will be wondering why people are not applying for roles. It could be a scenario where you actually got an unconscious bias scenario going on that you're not aware of in your process. And then recruiters can also create a blind system of reviewing resumes whilst keeping a clear eye on their organization's unique demographics and diversity. So where we're really serious about this, where we don't want our managers and people to bias, we actually use candidate numbers. We don't necessarily need to know what their names are. So we kind of freely give proper access, right? Access to equality. We don't discriminate, because we look at the name, and from the name we can tell that this person comes from this tribe, or this ethnicity, or this person may be a guy, or how we use the blind system in our recruitment process. We widen the talent pool, and we also minimize this type of unconscious bias as well. So that's just some examples there in terms of why diversity, inclusion, and equality matters. It's better employee performance, better employee engagement, and even in terms of retention, more innovation, more ideas, more solutions. There's no point organization being there and it doesn't have a lot of innovation. It's going to become archaic, and eventually it's not going to be competitive. Higher revenues, meaning that when we have a diversity, we have more ideas, we have better leadership, because we've got different perspectives coming in, and that definitely research has shown gives higher revenues. And then of course, we have larger talent pool access. Okay, so we're saying that was just to kind of put a bit of foundation around what we mean around diversity, inclusion, and gender equality. But really, it's about looking at where does inclusion, diversity, and equity all start, right? And it starts with the C-suite. It starts at the senior. It starts at the senior level. And it starts at the senior level because with anything we do when it comes to human resource, managing our workers and building systems and initiatives and structures in our organizations to make them attractive, to retain our talent, and for them to work to their productivity and bring us results, which is, of course, our revenues and all of that. It comes from the leadership, the buy-in from the leadership, all right? So here we're talking about, for this all to work, or for us to really begin to take small steps towards this, we need to break the barriers right from the very top, because the very top also have issues concerning these areas we're talking about. So this means that we need to re-envisage our approach to diversity, inclusion, and equality in our businesses, in our organizations. We need to look at where are we on this? What is our views? What are we doing about it? Even if we're doing something, can we improve? So we need to, and it has to be at the C-suite level, that's the senior management level, up to board level, where you're having a board. What is our approach? And then it starts at the top. The CEO and executive team must also truly buy into the inclusive workplace and promote it, right? Because if it comes in from the middle, so the managers, the HR, but we don't see it being practiced or being embraced, then the likelihood of it surviving or even being effective is limited, because all the time people take more value when they know that the top have bought the value, have also bought into it, right? Then it's like, yes, we have to comply. So it's really important that we break the barriers from the top. And then developing your internal diverse team and trying to promote from within. So you use tools of mentorship, coaching, and professional development. So we're saying that if we are putting in this policy to make sure that we're monitoring our diversity, inclusion, and equality activities, then some of those activities will be looking at how diverse our team is, trying to promote from within, right, before we go out, using tools like mentorship, coaching, and personal and professional development to develop those people we identify as we want to build their capacity in order to distribute them in the areas that we feel that they will be good at. All right. External hires and the approach to hiring must also be looked at. All right, to drive diversity. So I talked about unconscious bias in our recruitment process. Do you need to do a review to see how you're practicing that? And if you do decide that, okay, you're going to do an assessment, what we call diverse inclusion and equity readiness assessment, you want to find out, what is driving our diversity or not, or inclusion or equity, okay? So you want to use those to assess some of these areas to see what is happening there. And then making diversity, inclusion, and equity the front and center in the public way to set your company apart from the competition. So it's not just us talking about it internally, it's also good for it to be shown in the activities you do, whether it's on your website, your social handles, for the public or your customers, your stakeholders, to see that actually it is very important to you. And remember I mentioned about employer brand and your reputation. That's how you do it. People need to kind of know, all right, this company, we celebrate, we encourage people from diverse backgrounds, we are inclusive, and we do offer equality of opportunity for all, and also gender equality issues are important to us. So that's one way that you can actually do that. And then raising awareness by getting the C-suite executives trained in diversity, inclusion, and gender equality. It's really important to have these trainings starting from the top and cascading down, because once they've understood the value and the benefit, it's easier for you, whether you're the HR or the CEO in charge of this, to be able to come up with the strategy to kind of progressively implement it within your organization, or maybe you're the owner. Once you've understood from the training, what exactly does it involve? What do I have to do in a workplace to make this work? You can now either task it or know that, okay, this is how we're going to implement it in the business. And then, of course, making an effort to bring more diversity to the leadership team. I cannot stress that enough. This is why we're talking about it from the perspective of the C-suite, because if the C-suite I've seen it time and time again, you know, in Ghana, in the UK, and other places where you have this team of leaders where it's just not diverse, it's just kind of regimented, it's just one way, and so decisions and everything is always one way. And you can sometimes experience this when you go to organizations and you hear the workers talking. You usually indicate to you that the leadership is not diverse because they will describe very regiment, but it's very one way, no one can infiltrate, it's a certain type of group of people and so on. And that stifles organization, that stifles your business, even if it's a family business and you have many family members in it, for your business to sustain, you need to have other people be part of that business from different perspectives for your business to stand. But a lot of the time, this is not happening, and so we create a leadership maybe it's just all family members. There's a one way of looking at things, and that can also impact on your business. So whether it's an organization, whether it's a family-owned business, diversity in the leadership is very, very important. Okay, so what are some of these benefits? So if you look at some of the gender ones, so gender diverse boards are more likely to adopt proactive social and environmental policies, practices, and reporting generally. Gender diverse boards, this is talking from the board level, reports financial performance in a more transparent and accurate manner than male-dominated boards. So when the women come in, we have more transparency when it comes to reporting financial performance, which is good. Female directors often bring new perspectives and offer alternative solutions for complex problems. So this is why it's important to have female executives at the executive level. Studies have also shown that having an inclusive leadership is critical to meeting new talent demands. Okay, so if you also narrow yourself and it's only this group of people I'll hire or this type, you limit your talent pool. So that means that in your organization or your business, you can't find people to fill roles because you've kind of streamlined it to be a certain type of persons, and they are not many, right? And sometimes, so you're having talent problems. But when we open up and appreciate what people are bringing on board as to some of these biases that we hold, we get more opportunity to tap into more talent. And then also in terms of collaboration, so companies with inclusive leadership, where the leadership has women, it has people from different ethnic backgrounds, different age, it's kind of diverse and inclusive. It says that it improves team collaboration by 29% and their effectiveness by 57%. This is a research done by Change Board. So you can see that when you have, because you're going to have a pool of ideas and so on. Female leaders also tend to have a more collaborative leadership style than men. And then we'll move on to the McKinsey report, which also says that women matter, and it talks about the fact that you can improve the business operations when you're having women by as much as 55% and boost the return on equity by 35%. These are not small percentages to be having in your business. And then diversity equals higher financial returns for businesses, which I've mentioned to you earlier, because you've got more innovation, you've got more insights, you've got more ideas, you've got more. When people are also happy, they tend to work better when they feel that they are in an environment where they are accepted, where they can see other people like them are in it. It all contributes to the productivity and the bottom line. They also came up with saying that there was a significant correlation between improved financial performance and diverse leadership, right? So that's what we're talking about, is at the C-level, the importance of diversity at the leadership really has an impact on the financial, on the money, the income you are bringing into the business. And I feel like any CHROs or HR directors listening, you've got to put the business case to this, and you've got to take it on to look at how you're going to tap into this for your organization. Time and time again, that's what the research is showing, that there is a significant correlation between improved financial performance and a diverse leadership, all right? Businesses with the most ethnic diversity at higher levels are 33% more prone to have better profitability than firms that do not. So where you have ethnic diversity, you are more likely, 33% more prone for better profits than where you don't. So that again tells you about the importance of diversity around ethnicity. Then team performance. So here, diverse workforce efforts and inclusion at work makes for 17% better team performance. That was a research done by Deloitte. And then a diverse leaders prompt employees to work 12% harder, right, than leadership groups, teams that are not diverse. And this was a research done by Change Board. So you can see that these trends are happening, and this is the reason why I'm talking about this, is that we need to begin to look at look at it from this perspective, and we need to be able to put the business case to the leadership in terms of embracing this, because as we're seeing the trends moving, these are going to become factors that women use to decide where they want to work, because we know that as we are now moving in the future of work, there's going to be a lot more women in the workplace, and a lot of these women are very talented, they know what they're about, and as a company, you need to hire talent, and they may now be in a power position of deciding whether they come and work for your business or not, based on how diverse, how inclusive, and your gender equality practices, right? So we cannot just ignore it. At the same time, you also have the different generations coming. You know, our younger generations think very differently. Even in Ghana, here in Africa, here in Nigeria, wherever you go, the mindset of our millennials, our Z generation are very different. They are not coming from the boomers generation and that thought process. And these things are important to them. You know, now we have situations where some of them can even just stop working just because they don't like the way the company is running or handling them. They're not even giving you a chance to even rectify. They just leave, right? And so, because we've empowered them to appreciate certain things, so they're also coming into the workplace with different mindset. And these particular things are important to them. Seeing that the environment is inclusive, is diverse, and also it allows them to be, you know, have access to equity regardless of their gender. So we can't just ignore it. And the organizations that will have the competitive edge will be the organizations who take these things, this particular area very seriously, and actually do something about it. Okay. So in conclusion, why should you embrace it? Why should your organization embrace it? Whether you're a business owner, whether you're coming from an organization, I'm saying that you need to embrace it because the management of diversity has become a critical aspect of global businesses and dynamics within societies since, and when you properly manage diverse workforce, it has a greater competitive advantage. We need to think about it because even now, as we speak, if I just pick an industry, like if you look at the e-commerce space, if you look at the new opportunities that's coming through the AFTA, where we're going to be able to cross-border trade and go into other countries, you need to have you need to understand how diversity, inclusion, and equity is working, because you may even be engaging workers that are not from your territory that you're operating. You're going to have customers and stakeholders who are coming from different backgrounds as well. If you've not made your organization understand to appreciate the differences in your stakeholders, and how are you going to handle them? Are you going to handle them with your unconscious bias? Is that going to help your profit margin? So it's not even just about the internal now, we also have to look out to how we're dealing with our suppliers, the stakeholders who engage with our businesses or our organizations. Also, we need to be making sure that we're looking at how we're promoting diversity in that aspect as well. Then the relevance of managing diversity is to create an inclusive environment which facilitates a sense of belongingness, appreciation of individual unique characteristics within a diverse workforce, and leadership, right? So we're trying to create an environment where we feel included, where we want to be part, which brings out the best in us, which affects the bottom line, that's the income, the financials. And there's a strong business case for workplace diversity, inclusion, and gender equality. People are the powerhouse behind your businesses. Whether you're the business owner or you are the business leaders, the people are the powerhouse. Without the people, we're not going to achieve a lot. And hiring a variety of demographics positively right, affects your work environment, your revenue, and your brand reputation. So it means you've got to take this element very, very important, because it's also important to the people who are the powerhouse behind your business or behind your organization. And as we are moving, this is going to become a very big deal. So this is what I'm talking about it. Okay, so all the technical hitches, we have come to the end. So if anybody has any questions, you can either type it in the chat and I can answer them. Whilst I wait for some questions, well, I actually have a question to ask. Listen to me talking about diversity, inclusion, and gender equality. What do you think are the blockers in your organization or your business that is going to stop you or is stopping you from maybe embracing it, or if you've already started listening, what areas are you thinking that you need to improve, or do you even think this is something you should look at or is important to your business? Is this new to you? So kind of also share your thoughts as well as having questions. And I wanted to say that if you do want to have training for your organization, you can reach out to me. I'm championing diversity, inclusion, and gender equality training for the International Labour Organization, that's the ILO. And this is a 3 months program where we start off with three days classroom training. And then at the end of that, you have coaching sessions. So we come up with a whole plan around these 3 areas of what we're going to do, which is unique and relevant to your organization. And then you have coaching visits and coaching sessions with myself and making sure that you are able to implement this. And it goes right from the very top right down to the employees. And it's a strategy that, of course, looks at also KPIs and measures relevant to your organization. So if you're interested in that, you can just send me a message or WhatsApp me, message me, link to me, wherever you are connecting with me, you can just message me. And I can send you a bit more information on it if you want to have your teams or leaders, etc., trained in this area and you want them certified by the International Labour Organization. You can do that. Okay, do we have any questions that we want to ask? Are we having any challenges concerning this area? I know that it's an area that is still relatively, it's not new, but we're not placing the importance on it as we should. But I can tell you that there is no getting away from this. It's already happening in organizations. A lot of multinationals that come into our space when they're even hiring you are looking at some of these things, and we need to start looking at it and from a strategic advantage perspective. Okay. All right, so well, if no one has any questions, then I'm going to thank you all, as usual, for those of you who were able to join me. I'll do my best to see if I can piece the recording together because we had a lot of interruptions. If I can, I will do so and share. But it's been a pleasure, as always, for you to share. I hope you did take something from it. And of course, you can reach out to me following the session if you want to discuss anything concerning it. But moving forward, I really want to encourage you to really look at this, because it's not going to go away and it's going to become a factor. In fact, it's going to come to a point where when recently we had a client going for a bid for proposal for a contract, and the company that they were going for, the institution that they were applying for this contract, asked them for their policy on diversity, inclusion, and gender equality. And luckily for them, because we manage the HR, we obviously have created these policies for them, and we were in the process of implementing, including down to the suppliers. But this is it, in proposals, they are asking for it. You may go for a job and you'll be asked, what is your take on this as the HR or even as a leader going in? And the higher up you go into certain environments, they want to know how you're going to address this particular area. So it's not just about your organization or your business. Those of you in careers, this is also a big area. And definitely, as you know, sometimes in Africa we're lagging a bit behind when things are happening in the denomination, but eventually, very quickly, it gets into our space and we are found displaced. So I want to just encourage you that yes, it's a step at a time, but after hearing, at least you can start with just trying to raise awareness, right? Just trying to raise awareness, trying to understand where your organization or your business is when it comes to diversity, inclusion, and gender equality. Just start from there, and then, of course, you can cascade. But for those of you who have organizations that are well established and you know that, okay, this is important to you in terms of your values or principles, or actually want to try and capitalize on the benefits that I shared with you, you can always reach out, obviously, to have a more formal, in-depth training and support to implement this as a policy and a practice in your organization. All right. So thank you very much. As always, it's been a pleasure. We only do the 4 of these webinars a year. This is the first for this quarter, and we'll share subsequent sessions that we're going to be running on our website and in our social handles, so that you can register early for the awards. We've got very good topics, and also I'm going to be inviting other facilitators for the subsequent ones as well. So do look out for them, where we're trying to tackle some of the areas that we know at the C-level or the owner or the high level. Sometimes you just need to have like an independent perspective on them. All right. So it's been a pleasure. I'm wishing you a very good day. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. Have a very good day. Thank you and goodbye. Bye. Have a good day.
Thank you very much. Have a good day too.
You're welcome.